We started visiting campuses on the belief that you have something important to say that we need to hear. And so in as much as we are looking forward to answering your questions, we do hope you will also share your thoughts with us, particularly around sort of the theme of this project, which is how do we restore the promise of Canada? It is our belief that there are many issues in this country right now that need to be fixed, and frankly are holding back young people from living up to their potential all across our great nation. I had a lot of concern when looking at the spike in youth unemployment, for example, the cost of housing, making owning a home out of touch and out of reach for so many people, that young people across our country would start to blame themselves and think that they have made bad choices or they've done something wrong, and that is the reason why life has become increasingly difficult. The reality is that the situation we find ourselves in today is the result of choices made by people in positions of power, choices made by politicians, choices made by big corporate, fat cats on Bay Street, choices made by bureaucrats in Ottawa that have led us to a point where life is increasingly difficult for young people, despite young people doing what has been asked of them, which is to work hard, get an education, and go out into the job market well prepared for success. So when we say restore the North, that's what we mean. We mean we need to get back to a place where hard work is rewarded and that young people are excited and enthusiastic about their futures in our country. We're going to share what Restore the North means to us before we open up the mics. We will be joined in the latter half of our event by some of your local Conservative MPs, Andrew Lawton, Kurt Holman, and Leanne Rood. They will be here to offer concluding remarks today and also to meet with all of you. I'm going to start off, before I get to any specific things, I do think it's important that I acknowledge two people who sort of paved the way for what we're doing right now. Of course, first is rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. Many Canadians watched him on YouTube for about 13 years. He's been famous and left a legacy behind of free speech and free debate on campuses that I think we all enjoy now, in part because of the influence that he had. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Jordan Peterson, who did a lot of that same work on university campuses in Canada. He is facing a very serious illness right now, so if you pray, I would encourage you to pray for him and his family. So what Restore the North means to me. So there are a few things that I want to touch on. So first would be restoring free speech in our country. There is legislation up for debate in Parliament right now, Bill C-9, which you may have heard about, which would expand the definition of unacceptable speech or hate speech beyond what we currently have in criminal law in this country. I am of the belief that what we have in criminal law already is a strong way to regulate speech that can be seen as inciting violence, and that the government really shouldn't be going beyond what we already have in the law by introducing new legislation like Bill C-9. This has been a recurring effort for years by the Liberal government. It's been a decade of multiple attempts to further control our speech. If you go on Instagram or Facebook right now, you will see there are certain news sources that you're not able to read or access on those platforms. That is a direct result of federal legislation. There's also been an issue that they have changed the name of multiple times. Most recently, it's been called online harms, which would further regulate and create new bureaucracy in Ottawa to control what you can see and say on the internet. This goes against free speech as an important part of Canada's political and cultural tradition, and it is something that we fight for in Ottawa on a regular basis to maintain a healthy balance between stopping speech that can and should be and has historically been considered criminal in this country, and the vast amount of speech that we need to be able to express ourselves. Another issue that I think about when I think about how we restore the North is immigration policy. I, like many of you probably in this room, I'm a descendant of immigrants. My father came here from Kenya, my grandfather from Scotland, my grandmother from Ireland. Most of us in this room have a story of immigration in our background. It used to be for a long time that Canada was the envy of the world for having an immigration system that was very focused on positive integration into our economy and positive integration into our culture. We have seen that immigration system fall apart in recent years. volume is a problem, way too many people coming into the country, but also the lack of opportunity for people who do come into the country to find success, the same kind of success that my grandfather, my grandmother, and my father were able to find here. As a result, this has now become a highly divisive issue. And we see hatred and conflict spur up over this issue over and over and over again. It is my belief that this is a result of bad policy, and that we have to work very hard to not fall into the trap of pointing fingers at one another and blaming people who come here, but instead making sure that we restore our immigration system to a point where it is focused on law and order, that people are vetted properly, and that the right number of people are coming into our borders every year. You will see the current government position themselves many, many times as if they are listening to the feedback that they are getting, as if they are making reforms and changes. I can tell you, as a person who has a front row seat in Parliament and seeing what is happening to our country, that they have made zero changes. They are working down the exact same direction from the budget they released last week to the week prior to that, them voting for legislation, Bill C-3, that would permit unlimited chain migration into our country without even being able to tell us how many new people will enter the country under that bill. Last, before I turn things over to the wonderful Member of Parliament from Hamilton East Stony Creek, I also want to touch on things like DEI. I grew up at a time in this country, I'm not that old, I'm old compared to many of you in this room, but I'm 38 years old. I grew up at a time where we thought it was virtuous and good for the government to treat all people equally and fairly. And we have gone very, very far from that in recent years. It is mainstream government policy now to offer people jobs and government programs based on what they look like or where they come from. And I just fundamentally think that's wrong. Our history in this country is full of people who fought very hard to be treated the same as everybody else, so that all citizens in this country would be treated equally. DEI has become the most recent way to virtue signal a form of, frankly, racism that is now being passed through every major corporation, every federally regulated industry, and of course the federal government itself. I call this liberal racism because it is a form of racism that has been dressed up to look more palatable to people. But if you go back and you search in your hearts and you look at what you believe is fundamentally right, I think you will agree with me that it is good and just for people to be treated the same on the basis of their citizenship, that they would all be treated equally, and that is not the country we have right now.